has gone wild. It sounds like the title of a bad reality show series on Bravo TV, but unfortunately it's the state of affairs here in our constitutional republic, as Kara Castronova explains from the White House.
The same D.C. judges who spent years denying due process to Trump supporters are now suddenly activist champions of justice, but only for illegal immigrants. Judge James Boasberg is at the center of this hypocrisy, proving due process only matters when it serves their political agenda. Boasberg ruled that illegal immigrants and accused Tren de Aragua gang members cannot be deported under the Alien Enemies Act, claiming it violates their due process rights. On Monday, a D.C. panel heard the Trump administration's appeal. One judge even went so far as to say that the United States treated Nazis better than the illegal migrants that have now since been deported to a jail in El Salvador. But where was this concern for due process when it came to American citizens targeted for January 6th and for protesting an election? Boasberg and D.C.'s judges allowed the Biden administration to label Trump supporters as domestic terrorists and insurrectionists. And some judges themselves publicly called J6 defendants terrorists before their trials. This destroyed these Americans' chances of a fair jury pool or due process. But where was Judge Boasberg's outrage for due process then? To further illustrate, Judge Boasberg sentenced decorated NYPD officer and 9/11 first responder Sarah Carpenter to years in prison. Sarah was a nonviolent protester known for shaking a tambourine on January 6th. Boasberg even allowed the Justice Department to submit her rosary beads and nativity set as evidence against her at her trial that were confiscated during an unconstitutional raid on her home. For 4 years, Trump supporters were violently beaten, denied medical care, locked in pretrial solitary confinement, no hearings, no presumption of innocence, no bail or fair trials for many J6ers. Activist judges like Boasberg threw them into D.C. jail or D.C. gulag, denying them their due process rights as American citizens. But now, Boasberg is fighting for illegal immigrants, while he sat deafeningly silent as Americans were tortured and jailed for protesting the election of Joe Biden, who just happens to be the former vice president of the president who appointed Boasberg. If due process genuinely mattered, Boasberg could have used his questionable yet massive activist platform to speak out. He did not. Instead, he upholds a two-tiered justice system where illegal immigrants get rights, but Trump supporters get years of solitary confinement in a gulag a few miles away from this White House. So, why does due process only apply when it benefits the left's political agenda? If you support President Trump, you're a domestic terrorist before trial. But if you break U.S. law and enter illegally, Boasberg and D.C.'s judiciary will fight for you. This isn't about justice, it's about power. And as long as activist judges control the courts, Americans will pay the price. At the White House for Lindell TV, I'm Kara Castronova.
There were no procedures in place to notify people. Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemy Act than has happened here. If the government says we don't have to give process for that, then y'all could have put me up on Saturday and thrown me on a plane, thinking I'm a member of Tren de Aragua and giving me no chance to protest it.
That was Judge Patricia Millay sticking up for the hardened criminals, or at least the paramilitary troopers. You know how we've talked about them at Tren de Aragua. Join us now to discuss the obviously activist judges that plague our judiciary at large. As a member of the Judiciary Committee, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona. Congressman, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Emerald. Thanks for having me.
I know particularly because you have been very focused on not only the immigration issue, the open border, but just rule of law in general, right? Especially with your background. We have a real problem here in our judiciary in this country, Congressman.
Well, we certainly do. And the judge you just heard likening taking out international terrorist organization, which is what has been designated as such, where these people are being removed, and claiming that they're like Nazis that Nazis were treated better in America. I mean, that's, first of all, that's incredibly factually erroneous. Second of all, it's incredibly insulting. But thirdly, it gets to the point of this legislation from the bench, this bias that so many judges have. And she's not the only one. We're seeing this all over the place with dozens and dozens of lawsuits designed to stop the executive branch from enacting its agenda. And a lot of times they have no basis whatsoever, but they're pressing on anyway.
So I want to talk about solutions. There has to be some accountability for these judges. I feel like there's been the suggestion on this show many times by many different people that perhaps Congress could bring in judges like Millay or some of those J6 judges who really didn't adhere to the rights of due process afforded under the Constitution, right, for the J6 defendants, that they should be brought in before Congress. That would probably be before your committee, the judiciary, and held accountable, that they should have to come in and testify and answer for their behavior on the bench. Is that something we might see in the near future? Is Congress going to do anything about these judges?
Well, I don't know you're going to see him come in on a panel. Some people want to do that, but I'm going to give you some other solutions that I've been working on. So
Okay.
for one of them, I've got a piece of legislation that takes away some of their jurisdiction with regard to injunctions and TROs, so that they cannot issue a nationwide injunction. That's just not going to happen. So that's one thing. Another thing, though, that I think is actually I'm starting to get some legs, and this is a fun one for me. This is to go to Article 3, Section 1. A lot of people talking about impeachment, by the way. There's been probably half a dozen, I believe, articles of impeachment filed on some of these judges. I don't think that goes anywhere. So I wanted to find something that goes somewhere that's constitutional. So Article 3, Section 1 talks about, a lot of people, it talks about how long a judge can sit, a federal judge. And a lot of people think it's a lifetime, but that's not it. They only have a tenure during a time of good behavior. And who determines the good behavior? Well, I believe it's Congress that determines the good behavior. We set the jurisdiction, we do the confirmation, we create the lower courts, we can get rid of the lower courts, and it also says that they only have tenure for good behavior. So that tells me, Emerald, that what we could do, and I'm working on this now, this will be filed in the next day or two here, is an Article 3, Section 1 claim resolution that a particular judge, and we're looking at several, but we'll start with one, is no longer in good standing because they're not exercising good behavior, and they should be fired and terminated pursuant to Article 3, Section 1. That's what we're working on. I think that is a good way to go. And then there's always money. I mean, my colleagues should join me. We should be removing funding for certain courts because they're doing they're acting inappropriately, quite frankly. They're abusing their power and their authority. And that's what this all gets down to. We can get a bad ruling, a ruling that I don't like, but if it's not based on bias, then I can understand it. But some of these just seem so obviously biased that the judge needs to be held accountable.
I agree with you. And I think that based on some polling I saw today from Rasmussen Reports, a large part of the American public agree with you, Congressman Biggs. I find this resolution particularly interesting because it does seem like a valid constitutional solution, right? How much support do you have amongst your colleagues in Congress for such a resolution?
Well, so far it's picking up. I mean, let's face it, that it has been ignored. Article 3, Section 1 has never been used in the history of the country. And so it becomes a bit of an interesting conundrum, because people are like, well, that's right, that makes sense, but we've never seen it used. So they don't quite know how to use it. So I'm trying to lay that path out. We've got another bill that talks about how you use Article 3, Section 1. But I'm going to tell you that I believe that we can use the same simple majority in the House and the Senate that you use for confirmation. And this is a very different animal than impeachment, because impeachment has all kinds of other connotations. It implies that you've committed a crime, We're doing something different. We're talking about good behavior and failure to adhere to good behavior.
And you know what? You're giving us a bit of civics lesson as well, Congressman Biggs, because I think a lot of Americans didn't know about that. Many people do believe they're lifetime appointments. So you're going to have to educate people a little bit like with this. I do want to clarify what you said. One of the provisions that might be allowed under this, getting rid of the lower court. Can you just expound on that a little bit? I find that very interesting.
Yeah, so the only court that is constitutionally created is the U.S. Supreme Court. The Congress is given specific authority to create what the Constitution calls lesser courts. And so from very early on, you had legislation from Congress to create district courts and appellate courts. And that's the system we have today. And they also broke them up into districts. So now we have various districts. You know, I live in the 9th district. I'm not sure what district you live in, but those districts are organized with various district courts, the lower courts, the lowest courts, and then the appellate court. And then you have the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is the only one that has original jurisdictions mentioned in the Constitution. None of the other courts have any jurisdiction except for what Congress gives them through statute. That means that Congress can give you jurisdiction, it can take away jurisdiction. Congress can create a court, we can eliminate a court. That's what's meant in Article 3, Section 1.
I think this is very interesting. I think this is something to keep our eye on. I hope you get, the support continues to grow. You say you're going to file this in a couple days, this resolution?
Yes, that's correct. Before the end
we'll be watching.
Yeah, before the end of the weekend.
Okay, great. And you know what I feel like? I feel like, though, and this brings us to my next topic before we run out of time, we're not hearing much about the legislative agenda of this second Trump term, right? We're watching DOJ, we're looking for accountability perhaps at the FBI. There's lots of squirrels around, but we haven't talked much about the legislative agenda. That's something that your colleague, Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee, who feels like a neighbor to me, noted on Twitter or X yesterday saying, he said, get off your victory lap. We're one flu season away from losing our majority. Make us follow through with codifying real Donald Trump's agenda. The piece of legislation that got some interest in the public was that presented by another Tennessee congressman, Andy Ogles, suggesting that there should be legislation allowing for a third Trump term that was filed just a couple days after inauguration. So what is the legislative agenda, number one? And number two, is that possible? Ogles' legislation could actually pass and there is a pathway to a possible third Trump term? So
let's cover I don't believe there's a path for Andy Ogles' resolution to go forward, Emerald, if you want the truth. I'm always going to tell you the truth. I just don't see
that's absolutely true.
Yeah. I don't see that there's a path there for that. But when we start talking about what the agenda for Congress is, Tim Burchett is right on the money. It is actually to codify much of what President Trump has done through executive order. And then to also press and make sure that you've taken care of border security, make sure that you've funded projects that need to be funded, make sure that you're deregulating, making sure that you're getting the tax package that President Trump campaigned on, and frankly, most of Congress campaigned on those things. That's really the plan. So if I were to break it down in a few areas, I would say economically, budget-wise, you have to do the tax package. You have to find ways to reduce spending, and you have to reduce regulation. All of those are happening through the executive branch. Congress needs to do the same. The other thing that Congress has been doing on the deregulation front is we have passed a good number of CRAs, Congressional Review Acts, where we've taken out some regulations by the Biden administration, which leads me to one of my bills, which actually gets to the deregulation part, where my bill, the Midnight Rules Relief Act, actually says we can do more than one at a time. That's why it's so doggone slow, is because you can only do one at a time. And now I bring them in. And by the way, Emerald, the Biden administration in the last 60 days or 70 days They did over 1,400 final rules that impact the budget and our economy by $1.34 trillion. And so my bill says, if we want to, we can go back and get rid of all of those and save over $1 trillion to our structural deficit that's so bad right now. So those really are the areas. And then of course the other two areas are border. You got to take care of the border, make sure that really is taken care of for certain. And then the ultimate thing is to shrink the federal government, and that's what's happening.
Like that one.
Yeah, and I call that, by the way, I call it new federalism, because that's what Trump is doing. He's engaging in new federalism, and that's really, really.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That's an easy, simple explanation of it. And look, we love that you give it to us straight. That's why we like to have you on The Absolute Truth, Congressman Biggs. When your resolution is filed this week, we will share it with our audience. Thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Emerald.
You, my friend, need Native Path collagen, made with only type 1 and type 3 collagen fibers. These are the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. It's found in cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, your gut. Type 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Also, Native Path collagen has no additives, no artificial sweeteners. It's also completely flavorless, which is important because Native Path collagen can be added to anything. I put it in my coffee. Also, because of its special peptide formulation, it mixes more easily than any other collagen I've ever tried, and I've tried a lot. But the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals. You can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. Plus, they have a 365-day no-risk guarantee, making Native Path the trusted choice. All you have to do is visit getnativepath.com/truth. That's getnativepath.com/truth to start your transformation. Susan Crawford is one of the most left-wing people to have ever run for Wisconsin Supreme Court. With the backing of some of the biggest donors in the Democratic Party, notably, and of course, right, George Soros, her election could lead to the redistricting of Wisconsin that would ensure that the Democrats win the next midterm elections in 2026. Now, beyond George Soros, LinkedIn founder and Elon Musk rival Reid Hoffman has contributed over $14 million to Crawford's campaign. The current governor of Illinois and the heir to the Hyatt hotel fortune, J.B. Pritzker, has given more than $6 million to her campaign. Well, meanwhile, on the flip side, Elon Musk is pouring billions of dollars into the campaign of Brad Schimmel, Crawford's Republican opponent, in what many believe to be a proxy war between Donald Trump and the Democrats for control over Congress to come in 2026. And it's not just President Trump lending his star power to Schimmel, but also an all-star very well known in Wisconsin, Hall of Famer Brett Favre.
Hi, I'm Brett Favre. You must get out and vote April 1st for Judge Brad Schimmel. The future of Wisconsin is at stake here. This is as important as the November election, and that was for the soul of America. This is for the soul of Wisconsin. Your vote for Brad Schimmel will keep Wisconsin and America winning. And you know, I know a little bit of something about winning. When folks like you vote, America and Wisconsin wins.
I would disagree with Brett Favre in that this is still for the soul of America, as it could have major repercussions for the balance of power in Congress in 2026. It's exactly how our next guest, Peter Bernegger, feels as well, who has warned that the Democrats are doing more than pouring money into Crawford's campaign. They're looking to steal this very important off-year race. Peter, it's good to see you again.
Yes, thank you. And the importance of this race again for the nation is that if the liberal Susan Crawford wins, she's already been caught with Ben Winkler in a Zoom meeting with documents, in fact, obtained by the New York Times, nonetheless, whereby they wish to gerrymander, and I'll say rig, the U.S. congressional seat maps in Wisconsin, effectively eliminating 2 Republican seats, which would then obviously cause a loss in the House of those 2 seats, but then a gain of 2 Democrat seats. So a net loss of 4, if you will, where right now we have 218 in the House and subtract 4 and we're down to 1. But I want to point out there's other states that the Democrats are trying to do this in right now, in state Supreme Court races, including such as places as Louisiana. So the Democrats could potentially flip the House from the Republicans to the Democrats even as soon as this year, of course, causing a major problem for President Trump. But in addition to that, this race has already exceeded now $63 million. The new reports were filed just yesterday afternoon. The deadline was March 24th. And some are predicting, and it looks like it could hit $100 million for one state Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin. And of course, the problem is that this is the highest dollar amount already, even if we don't get to the 100 million projection that has ever been spent on a state Supreme Court race in the history of our nation. And that shows exactly why, is because they want to flip the House away from President Trump.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the importance of codifying President Trump's agenda a little bit earlier with Congressman Andy Biggs, but this would pretty much make sure that does not happen if they're able to flip the balance of power. This kind of reminds me, I don't know if you remember this, but this even, I think, exceeds the money potentially. I'd have to look back, but in that special election in Georgia in an off year, Georgia 6, do you remember that Georgia 6 district where you had millionaires pulling millions of dollars into that? This is even more important than that race.
It is, and now there's 5 billionaires. I tweeted out a few days ago about the 4 billionaires, 5 billionaires from out of state of Wisconsin contributing to liberal Susan Crawford's campaign. And I should clarify, the numbers are including not directly per se to her campaign. Some are, but most of it's going through the dark money PACs, the 527s, the 501c4s, and other super PACs. So that's where, most of the big tens of millions of dollars going. But I'm going to name them as Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, who is a terrible person. We know he's on the Jeffrey Epstein list. George Soros, Carla Verdenstein, I believe her name is pronounced. Michael Bloomberg joined in recently. He's the 5th one. Number 4 is J.B. Pritzker out of Chicago. And that's particularly worrisome because Pritzker has been caught obtaining money through 54 different NGOs, some connected to USAID, others directly from the U.S. Treasury, that he and his family have been getting government money, which looks like, to me, it looks like fraud that he's committing.
And I know that you put out a tweet listing these 5 billionaires, and that got the attention of Elon Musk, which then got the attention of the American people because Musk tweeted, and it has like some 40 plus million views. But I am concerned very much about the fraud I'm very concerned about the fraud in this election. We're not just talking about billions of dollars pouring in, but Joe Hoft has an exclusive article out today on joehoft.com saying that in 2024, in the Milwaukee election, Milwaukee absentee ballots were hid and processed behind a large black curtain. That's very problematic, and there's indications that will happen again this year, right? So, how bad will the fraud be in this race?
One of those pictures that you have, that's from one of our patriots who was down there, part of our team, and taking pictures and so forth. But they were hiding ballots, opening the ballots behind that black curtain. And there was a meeting recently with, it was a public meeting, but attorneys were there, the City of Milwaukee Election Commission, the clerk, and they admitted. They said, well, we have the curtain there to open the ballots in private. Well, the law in the state of Wisconsin doesn't say that. It says every step of the process is open to public and to observers. And there was dozens of observers there, many of them ours. And this was a point of contention here in a meeting just a few days ago, in fact, for the upcoming April 1st election, this coming Tuesday. So the other thing I'm going to point out is that on those campaign finance reports that were filed just yesterday by Brad Schimmel and, of course, the liberal Susan Crawford, we have identified already, we're still running the data, this will blow your mind, 119,362 unique donors to Susan Crawford's campaign. Now, We know already because many of those names have been identified over the years by us as Smurfs. And Smurfs are the ones, they're victims whose names and addresses are being stolen, their identities are being stolen to ram through volumes of contributions and dollars into liberals' campaigns. And the dollar amount of those 119,000 unique donors comes to $15.4 million. One person alone gave 84 times to Susan Crawford campaign. Now there's no people in the United States that do that.
Yeah, that's insane. Look, there's so much fraud in so many ways, right? But we do have some good news on the fraud front. So election fraud front fight. I want you to stick around with us for just a moment. Peter, we'll come back to you and get your reaction to the breaking news from Donald Trump today, who signed a huge executive order related to fighting election fraud in today's Election Fraud Watch.
You all understand that? Yes. Election fraud. You've heard the term. We'll end it, hopefully. At least this will go a long way toward ending it. There are other steps that we will be taking in the coming weeks, and we think we'll be able to end up getting fair elections. Perhaps some people think I shouldn't be complaining because we won in a landslide, but we got to straighten out our election. This country is so sick because of the election, the fake elections and the bad elections, and we're going to straighten it out one way or the other.
So Donald Trump following through and signing an executive order related to fighting election fraud. It lists several different provisions to better secure our elections. That includes, of course, trying to keep illegal immigrants from voting, but also promotes the use of voter verifiable paper ballot record, according to the White House, who put out this tweet saying that it also directs the Attorney General to enter into information sharing agreements with state election officials to identify cases of election fraud or other election law violations, amongst other provisions. He does say that there's more coming soon, more executive action. It sounds like it could be other action, I suppose, as well. Peter Bernegger, your thoughts on what the president did today?
Yeah, there's 4 key points, and of course more that you just had posted up on the screen. But one is the order says that they're going to be cutting federal funding to states who refuse to take steps to secure elections. That's a huge one because there's so many liberal states that you just can't get the in-place election officials to do anything. Even if you sue them, they still fight and fight and fight. But of course, to them, it doesn't cost anything. They're using taxpayer dollars to do that. The next second one is Department of Homeland Security resources are to be used to ensure that illegals are not voting. A third one, citizenship question is to be on the voting form for the first time. And if you falsify that answer, that would be a felony. And the fourth one is that the DOJ is to vigorously pursue election crimes, especially in states not compliant with federal law around election integrity. So I know what he's doing. He's targeting liberal states who we know they're committing election fraud. We can show it with documents and evidence and data and whistleblowers, but yet they keep cheating because they obviously want the liberals to win their elections. This is a great first step. And last comment is that U.S. Congressman Pete Sessions is also working on a draft. I believe it's like the 3rd or 4th version already. I've seen it where it's going to be codified into statute, federal law, to mandate certain things such as in-person voting, eliminate absentee mail-in ballots, get rid of the machines, and a host of other good things.
Yeah, it looks like it's a great piece of legislation. That is the Make Elections Secure Again bill, or the MESA bill, which corresponds with Mesa, Colorado, and our friend Tina Peters, who's sitting in prison right now as we speak for trying to help secure our elections. And it also would bleed into a little bit of what you posted in regards to Act Blue in Colorado on your X account, which I will refer our audience to because we've run out of time to talk about it. So a lot of good news, but we got to keep our eye on this Wisconsin race, right, Peter? That's everything kind of hinges on that right now, and then we can move forward with the other matters. But some good movement from President Trump.
Exactly. We have to remain vigilant on this April 1st race. And then again, don't forget the other states where the Democrats are trying the same play to flip state Supreme Courts so they can go and rig the congressional maps.
We'll be watching those. You told us to look out for Louisiana, which was not on our radar previously, so we'll be looking into that. Thank you so much, Peter Bernegger, as always. Very informative every time you join us.
Thank you.
Are you looking for monthly income without the risk of stocks because you don't feel like maybe you're well versed enough in the stock market? Well, here's something you won't hear about on CNBC. There's a unique way to collect royalties directly from America's most productive oil fields. No exploring, drilling, or operational headaches required. You simply collect checks month after month. And the best part? You can get started with just $25 through any brokerage account. The Oxford Club's chief income strategist, Mark Lichtenfeld, breaks down what he believes is the #1 oil royalty play for 2025. Simply visit RobinsonOilBoom.com now for more information. That's RobinsonOilBoom.com. RobinsonOilBoom.com now for more information. That's RobinsonOilBoom.com.
And we will continue to vigorously uphold on a 24/7, 365 basis, as vigorously as we pursue violent crime, those that abuse or corrupt or violate their oath of office at the FBI. And I will not stand for, I will have zero tolerance for those that we will utilize our badge to harm our country.
That was FBI Director Kash Patel speaking to Fox News recently, vowing to hold the FBI accountable for whatever excesses its agents engaged in when investigating the non-crimes of January 6 protesters. But our next guest and friend, Trennis J. Evans, says that the FBI violated his rights in a somewhat unique way. In a recent tweet, Evans explains that, quote, the FBI illegally tried to force him to work for them while he was on supervised release for his misdemeanor trespassing charge from January the 6th, 2021. A man named Agent Lucas offered him, according to Evans, massive cash payments, $30,000 off the books. Lucas proceeded to tell him that he was the kind of guy, according to Evans, that would go talk directly to an assistant United States attorney, an AUSA. He stated he could knock on the door of an AUSA and make things happen. Another threat. Join us now to tell this wild story and his firsthand account of it is Trennis J. Evans. He is himself a victim of the Biden regime's unjust political warfare against January 6 protesters. He's also the author of the book, Call It Insurrection. Comrade, this story is wild, and I have to wonder how many other people had an experience like yours, Trennis. Can you just walk my audience through what you experienced? What offer was made to you by Agent Lucas?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to remind you exactly what happened here so the audience can understand this. So I was trying frantically to get my information back, my products back, my property back from the raid on my home. The FBI raided my home. It's no secret that happened March 4th, 2021 for the misdemeanor crime of knowingly entering and remaining in a restricted building or what have you. And after I was sentenced, after I'd completed my prison term and I had already was on supervised release, I was remained on supervised release by the court for 3 years, which, by the way, was an improper sentence issued by Dabney Friedrich, and she damn well knew it, that when I went to the building to collect my property after dozens of phone calls, I was careful not to be harassing, very polite. This is Mr. Evans, Trennis Evans, etc. I was met at the guard shack by an individual that identified himself as Agent Lucas. Agent Lucas then proceeded to engage in friendly, casual conversation about the weather and whatever else. And we talked for a little bit, but he was going through a painfully slow process, or a process he was making painfully slow. And I see now why. In the beginning, I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to talk about the weather with the FBI. I don't really care about, small talk and chit chat. and he would like go through like half of a form for one of these items, like for my laptop, and identify the laptop and have it compare it to mine, and then he would kind of like, well, it's a little crazy what's happened, all this January 6th stuff, and over time. After about 40 minutes of this, I would say maybe I was there 30, 40 minutes. And I finally was like, look, sir, I've been here a while. I had to drive here about an hour to get here. Can I use a restroom so I can, I need to use the restroom. And he says, sure. So we take a break to go to the restroom. We go into the restroom. He follows me in the restroom, stands there talking to me while I'm using the restroom inside the FBI building, which I was just supposed to be at the shack to collect my things. And then he says, look, hey, I've got a more comfortable spot. Why don't we just sit here? We're already here. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought there was a lobby there. I thought maybe that's where we were going to sit. Next thing I know, he's walking through an access door, swiping his key and waving at somebody in a camera. And then I follow him through there. We go deeper into the building. He takes a turn down a hallway, and then he opens yet another door that he accesses with a card. And we step into what looks like what I thought like is an right. And then I realized that, no, this isn't an office. This is like an interrogation room or questioning room, I guess, where they ask people questions. Steel desk, couple cameras up in the corners. And he starts talking to me about the idea that, listen, Mr. Evans, the AUSAs, we can go knock on their doors. And he starts telling me about, becoming an informant of some kind and receiving cash payments. And I immediately tell him, I just don't want anything to do with whatever it is they're asking. I'm just trying to stay clear of this, but I'm also not trying to tick off the guy that I'm dealing with at the moment from the FBI, who's already exhibited to me the kind of things that they will do to the American public. So I said to the guy, I said, look, I'm on federal release for supervision. Even if I wanted to do this, I can't, right? It's not something says, oh, don't worry, we can work off the books. And I was like, what do you mean off the books? Like, what are you talking about? Like, and he says, well, we could give payments and we could do them in cash and they could be off the books. And I was like, what are you talking? By this time, I'm like, all right, you son of a, what? I want information on this. Like, I want to see how far you'll go. And I said, so what are you talking about payments? Like, what kind of payments? And he said, well, we could do, we've been known to do as much as $30,000 a month on, for the right kind of information. And I was like, well, I don't know the right kind of information. So I don't hang out with like cartel members. I'm not involved in trafficking or crimes. And I'm pretty sure you're not calling me to ask me for help and like running down people that steal grandma's mortgage, through the internet or something. So the only thing I could possibly help you with would be January 6th. And all of that's privileged communication. So I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what it is that you want. And he just says, look, you need to read between the lines. Shows me the back of his fingers like this and says, read between the lines, which to me, when I read between those lines, I only see one finger there. So I wasn't really happy with that. And it was pretty much, you need to understand what we want and where we're going with this. And he says, that's when he brought up the statement about being able to go down and see an AUSA. And I'm like, you can't prosecute me anymore for January 6th. That's over. We signed a plea agreement, the end of the story. And I told him, I said, I can't do anything with you, even if I wanted to. And he says, I said, I would be in violation of my probation and be in violation of the judge's order. I don't think my attorney would even go for it, even if all those people said so, because frankly, we don't trust you guys. And he says immediately, don't tell your probation officer. No need to tell the judge, and certainly don't tell you. I was shocked. I was like, it was going off in my head, all these alarms. Like, I can't believe this. And then I was wondering, how many other people did you do this to? So I called my probation officer that very day, immediately. I'm like, I don't know if this is a trap, a setup, what they're trying to pull. I contact my probation officer after calling my attorney. I called Steve Metcalf, told him what was happening. He was like, you got to be kidding me. I've never even heard of anything like this. I've heard of stories like this, but I've never dealt with anything like this. This is crazy. And he says, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, what do you think we should do? You're the attorney. He goes, well, look, this is the FBI. I mean, you and come at these J6 people, you see what they're doing, and we should. And I said, Steve, I want to report it. I just, let's just, let truth be the messenger here, put it in the sunlight and let that be the exposure. Let's see what Dabney Friedrich has to say about this, the Judge Friedrich. And let's see what the probation officer has to say about this. The FBI knowingly offered me and tried to coerce me, bribe me, and then threaten me into working for them while on supervised release, which was a direct violation of a court order from a federal judge. So at that point, I pick up the phone, call my probation officer, and tell him what's happening. He's like, "Oh gosh, Mr. Evans, this is not good." He said, "When they do this kind of stuff," I said, "What do you mean when they do this kind of stuff?" And he says, "Well, this isn't the first time I've ever heard of something like this." And I'm thinking, you mean the FBI regularly violates the federal court order openly, blatantly? And he goes, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "Then they've got you by the short hairs. They can make you do anything they want at that point. Because if you won't do what they say, then they just say, well, oh, gee, we didn't realize you were on supervised release, and we could just have to tell the judge, and you're in violation, you go to prison."
Did they continue to harass you? I mean, this sounded like it was carrot and stick. They offer you some money. If you don't do that, then there's the stick. So did you experience the stick after that day?
No, so I tell you what we did. So we told the probation officer, we filed a motion on the record with Dabney Friedrich. Anyone that's curious about that can go read my declaration in the motion titled number 85 and 85-1 on my court record. It's free and publicly available. I've got it on my website. You're more than happy to read. I declared under the penalty of perjury, which would have been a whole new crime for me, while on supervised release, which means if you commit another crime on supervised release, they get to open you up and charge you all over again, do all their stuff. The whole January 6th nightmare starts again for you. So I thought, no, let's just tell the truth, tell it exactly how it went down. It's all out in the open, and let's see what Judge Friedrich does about this. She's so interested in upholding the law. They're so interested in law and order. Well, guess how interested she was in law and order? The government filed a motion to compel any audio or video recordings I had of the event. Right? And before we could even answer, Judge Friedrich's about a minute order, basically telling us, get this out of my courtroom. She wanted nothing to do with it. So she's more than happy to subject me to criminal penalties if I violate the law, lie, give anything misleading. Yet when an FBI agent absolutely does exactly that, there is no penalty, there is no accountability, and zero interest. My probation officer doesn't have the authority to do anything about it. And this is where we end up.
So I know you have a civil lawsuit, right? Because this could cause you stress. I mean, and it also just puts you in an opposition. I mean, essentially they were asking you to, give them information about your fellow J6 defendants is what we surmise, right? They didn't say that explicitly, but we can probably guess that that's how you would have been valuable to them, right? In that kind of measure. We have 1 minute. I know your civil litigation's going forward. But what do you want? You have flagged this for Kash Patel and for the DOJ. What do you want Kash Patel to do about your story?
Well, Kash Patel said that he's going to hold FBI agents accountable. I believe that Kash wants to do that, but he first has to know about what they've done. He has to know about the brazen level of criminality that these people are prepared to take on and what they will do. And I don't believe he specifically told me he talked to other agents about me. So before he came to do this, and this guy's not a property officer, this guy's a completely different deal. I've called the property department. There's no Agent Lucas in the property department. So whatever the hell it was he came from is from something else. I don't know where. He gave me his card where he hand wrote the cell phone number on the back. I called him the following Monday and told him, because this is a violation, we are not doing this. We have nothing to do with this. But my fear is, Emerald, how many other people did they force into this? And this kind of corruption has to stop. Not only that, but I lived in fear for 2 solid years of what is Agent Lucas going to do to retaliate? Or what is the FBI going to do once you've exposed them to retaliate in violation of a court order? So you're faced with the idea that you either violate the court order or you do the FBI's bidding, or the other way around. And either way, you've committed illegal acts and you're screwed.
There's no winning. Real quick, 10 seconds, because I know people are just going to want you to clarify. You didn't take them up on the offer. You know where people are going to go with this story.
I did not take the money. I did not receive the offer. I called Agent Lucas and told him, thank you so much for your offer, but the FBI has been more than kind enough to provide me, or the government's been kind enough to provide me with a place to stay on the weekend, 3 meals, so you can take your offer and put it where the sun doesn't shine.
That's right. Just for the audience that doesn't remember, Trennis was reporting to prison every weekend to serve out his sentence. So we would often see him during the week and then say goodbye on the weekend and talk to him again on a Tuesday. Trennis, wild story. It's made for the movies, which maybe one day it will be. Thank you so much. Keep us posted.
Thanks, Emerald. I appreciate you. Thanks for helping bring truth to this.
And what has become a new national epidemic, a real epidemic, not, one concocted in the Wuhan lab. There's a growing trend of teachers, notably female teachers, becoming sexually involved with their students. The most recent example of this comes from Downers Grove, a middle-class suburb of Chicago. This 30-year-old special education teacher was caught having sexual relations with her 15-year-old student. In another disturbing case just down the road, a high school teacher was sentenced to 19 years in prison for possessing child pornography. But the Chicago area schools have been praised by corporate media and their Democrat Party overlords for having the courage to force feed anti-white propaganda as well as anti-American indoctrination to their students. In fact, the schools with these sexual perverts working as teachers are run by some of the most radical left-wing people imaginable. Joining us now is Terry Newsom. He's a resident in the area of Chicago and is also the host of the Behind Enemy Lines, a podcast documenting the decline of America's third largest city of Chicago. But Terry, we're always talking to you about this immigration issue, but really you got, and we noted this last week, you got into this activism and journalism because you were just a dad who was concerned about this sick, perverted, what we now call woke. I almost don't like using that term anymore because it's kind of gone off into different places, but the sick perversion and indoctrination in your kids' schools, right?
Yeah, the first school board meeting I ever spoke at was about genderqueer and the sexual pornographic pictures that were in there, and the school board insisted that it was not pornography because it doesn't fit the legal definition of porn, which is just ridiculous. Later, Sean Casten, radical leftist congressman here, I confronted him at a book banning event, and I brought my big poster from genderqueer, and he got so flustered. After 2 years, he goes, "There's only one person that brought pornography in this library, and it's him." And we've been fighting for that. I was attacked, pummeled, bigot, anti-gay for simply saying that's porn. I just don't want it in my kid's school. Now all of a sudden, when the congressman said it, nobody's saying anything. And his kid was in Downers Grove High Schools. There's Downers Grove North and South. And the two teachers, actually, you said down the road, those two teachers were both in my kid's school of Downers Grove South that were sexually molesting and pornographic images with children. And what I find ironic is they're so worried about all this woke culture and transgenderism and all this crazy stuff. And right under their noses, each teacher for about 1.5 years to 2 years had these activities going on right under their noses.
It does seem like we're seeing more women be involved in this kind of, sexually inappropriate relationships with children or pushing this sexually explicit content. Is this a new epidemic, or is it just that we're now paying attention?
I don't remember when I was in high school. I think it's new with more women because there's been other women outside of my kids' school area that there has been more of that going on. Also, TPUSA labeled this school board, D99 school board, as one of the most radical in the country a few years ago before all this stuff happened. Even at that point in time, they thought they were radical. And then in some of the health classes, they had there's Downers Grove North and South. In my kids' school, they had a lesbian, telling the kids that you're assigned your sex at birth. Downers Grove North, they had this transvestite full of tattoos doing the exact same class. Looks like she just walked out of prison with shaved head, teaching these kids, these sophomore children, that you're assigned your sex at birth.
Yeah, and you sent pictures of those. I mean, it was kind of amazing, and we'll add in those pictures for people to see. But you sent pictures of these two. I couldn't decide which one was the woman and which one was the man, or I was a little bit confused. I mean, you just look at those people. You only have to take one look at those people, Terry, and know that they should not be around your children. You don't even have to interview them or really talk to them.
Yeah, regardless of the content, they're intimidating. It's not, as Donald Trump says, this is not normal, right? And to say this is not normal doesn't mean you hate gay people and stuff, right? I think we're all embracing, let everybody do what they want to do, but don't force this stuff that's not normal. It's not right. It's sexualizing our children down our throats, and then insist that it's normal, and insist if you don't do it, we're going to attack you. We're going to go after your job. We're going to label you as anti-gay. It's not the case. We just don't want to sexualize our children, period. No matter if it's heterosexual or homosexual, these are children, both sides. They're children, and let's treat them like children and just teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's it.
So Terry, let me ask you, with the dismantling of the Department of Education, everything's going to go back to the states. I mean, there states had a lot of control, but there was the strong hand of the government with funding and the Department of Education, right? How is this going to go? Like, how is this going to impact your children's school there?
Well, it scares me, right? It's great that Trump did that, but remember, we're in the state of Illinois, right? Behind enemy lines, communist state of Illinois, and Pritzker from 4th grade through high school put tampon machines in these boys' bathrooms, free tampons and tampon machines throughout the whole state of Illinois. He did that. He did that with the money. So my concern is, I'd like to hear from the Trump administration, what does this mean to states like us? Do they get more money now to indoctrinate and sexualize our children since you're relinquishing this to them, right? I don't know. Nobody said anything. I mean, it's a good thing, and I think there's a lot of wasted money. But if it gets in the hands of these evil people that are sexualizing and indoctrinating our children, that could be bad for us in the state of Illinois. I mean, why would you put a tampon machine in a fourth grade boy's bathroom, or anyone's for that matter, unless there's something wrong with you?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think that, their proposition from their suggestion from the Trump administration is, look, you got to get control of your states, and you got to be active in your state and active in the community. But you are in sort of an uphill battle in the communist state of Illinois, Terry Newsom, and it's going to take a lot of parents to fight, right, to try to straighten out the education system there.
Yeah. A couple other things too. They have the League of Women Voters come into school and register the kids. I'm sure you know who they are, right? I tried to see if we could come in and register because they won't let us. I tried to help a few years ago to start a TPUSA chapter. Well, they had a leftist one in the school, right? They said, no, we don't allow national organizations. Then I found out the one that was sponsoring the ones in the kids' schools from California. So instead of letting Charlie Kirk and the kids organize one, I forced them to close their political club because they said that they would not allow Charlie Kirk's because it was national, which makes absolutely no sense. And then later, the principal at the time sent me an email saying, oh, he speaks racist, Nazi sentiment. And I got the email, and that was the true reason why. They just don't want us to have a voice, any voice whatsoever.
You know what is also amazing? I'm sorry, I still can't get over those 2 people that work in your kid's school. I'm so sorry. Those pictures are so horrific. One's actually a pastor at a Methodist church, right? So not only are they involved in the school, but they're involved in the church, which is blows my mind. Christians, get it together.
They're a collection of, I call them the LGBTQ Nazis that come after us. And so, yeah, the one is the pastor in the Methodist church who had dragged Santa Claus for innocent children. If you're so innocent, you believe in Santa Claus that brings you gifts.
Wait, they had dragged Santa?
Yes, you have the video. I was on HBO. I dressed as Bad Santa to protest there. And so if you're an innocent child and then you believe that Santa Claus is real and you believe the gifts you get from Santa are from Santa, not your parents, those kids are so young and innocent, even if they are gay or whatever. I don't think at that age they think, hey, I hope I could sit on a trans Santa, right? I mean, it's absurd. They're doing it to indoctrinate the kids. They're doing it for us. They're doing it to create, friction, and it's crazy. And then that pastor was going to be hired to be a counselor in the Downers Grove Public Library by the radical leftists. Is that what you want to counsel children, right? I mean, I think you'd want to have someone a little bit more emotional stability that would have the access to your children in a public funded library.
Look, this just highlights the fact that there was a victory, a battle was won, but the war is not over. We cannot get complacent. We have help in the White House now. We have help in the Trump administration, but there's still much work to be done by individuals in every state, every locality. Thank you so much, Terry Newsom, for bringing this story forward to our audience so that perhaps they can help out, and knowing that This is still happening in schools. We think it's over. It's not.
So one quick little last statement. My co-host Paul Drabick's running for village council. He's the only father that speaks up against this, right? And they're attacking him. Everybody's attacking him. He's a military vet. He's got little kids, and they're trying to destroy him and everyone around him. And Paul's the only guy that speaks up for parents like me. That's how we met, fighting at the school boards. And parents should not be scared to say this is not right. It's not appropriate for our children.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people feel that way, but they're not willing to step up. They're too afraid. We'd love to talk to Paul sometime, who's, you know, active in the politics as well, and is fighting the good fight and actually putting his name in the hat, right? Putting himself in the ring. Thank you so much, Terry.
Yeah, thanks.
Tomorrow, we plan to dive in even deeper into that executive order on election fraud signed by Donald Trump today. And we'll give you more perspective on it and context and what to look forward in the future. So you don't want to miss that. And that's the absolute truth.